And then my mum rang me, and then I was talking to my sister-in-law. Then it was 10:30, and I just went to bed.
Do you remember our intro?
What are you in bits about? Love it. Yeah. Am I right?
That is the intro. Welcome to In Bits, the podcast that deconstructs our digital lives. I'm Nicola.
Yeah, don't forget to introduce yourself. And I'm Liam, and we're both lecturers in IEDT in psychology and cyberpsychology.
So, Liam, what are you in bits about today?
I'm not really in bits about this. Our guest is in bits about this. We have the pleasure to introduce Derek Laffan. Hi, Derek. How are you?
Hello.
That was very excited.
I am. I think I'm so excited because I'm a long-term listener and I've loved the podcast. So it's like great to be here.
A call-in show. Long-term lister, first time
caller.
caller.
I feel like it is. Yeah.
So what problem do you bring to us today, Derek?
Yeah.
So what am I in bits about? No. So I have to say I have been. It's been great to listen to the podcast and see how you actually do arrive at great conclusions and understandings about our technological lives, as you say. Mm-hmm. So I guess today what I am in bits about is I am in bits about our fandom, and I'm in bits about how we not just navigate our lives in the entertainment side of technology and so on, but also who we are with those and how we identify ourselves with those media figures and with those interests. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
Brilliant. And of course, this is relevant to all our fans out there.
It is.
Our fandom. So,
Yeah,
sure.
I'm such a stan. I'm a stan.
Okay, wait.
I'm a
So,
stan.
like,
Sorry, Liam's trying to be serious.
I have structure around. I've had to put structure around both of you. So we're going to talk about stans. We'll get to what a stan is. If you don't know what a stan is, we're going to talk about fandom and we're going to talk about shipping.
And I'm mostly just going to try and derail the conversation for funsies.
If you've never heard of any of these topics, they're a part of or rely on something that you probably are aware of, which is parasocial relationships. They look at that subculture, how we interact with celebrities, people, particularly things like influencers and musicians. I'm going to keep this research light. Let's say I'm going to keep this research light because I think
very Liam branded.
No, but there's a lot of these topics are really kind of very relevant to everyday life, and we have a lot of experience around them. So we'll touch on the theoretical aspect of this,
Of course.
but we don't need to go into too much of a deep dive in terms of like methodologies. We'll leave that to Derek.
Derek's like,
yeah.
You didn't brief me on that?
You have two publications in this space. So you have to talk about this.
For a while back now. That's
He thought we were chatting earlier about Derek's research, and he was like, "Yeah, I published a paper in 2000." I was like, "Hang on a second, you'd be like 5."
Yeah.
And he was like, "I was like, do you mean 2020?" And I was like, "It's been a long 26 up for him already." But I like
January's not even finished.
I do have a definition. It's by Kim et al. 2023, and they say for many teenagers and young adults, these fan spaces are not only a side hobby, it's their primary social context where they meet friends, learn new skills, and figure out who they are. And I think there's a little bit of a spoiler warning needed here.
Spoiler or content?
Content, content warning, really. So
Wouldn't be us if there wasn't a content
if
warning.
anyone feels distressed by anything we talk about, this is generally a positive space. We're going to touch on some of the conflict or negative spaces that can be. We'll put those in the show notes if there's anything that you need support for. I think it's going to be more so around managing things like screen time and distinguishing between offline and online worlds, really. Yeah. So if I start with parasocial relationships first, it's the Cambridge Dictionary's word of the year. For us in research, we've been talking about cyberpsychology, or in cyberpsychology and psychology, we've been talking about parasocial relationships since the 50s. And it was Horton and Wall's study that looked at like TV shows and the early relationships that we have. And a parasocial relationship, I find, is fascinating because it's when people move from interest in something to actually using first-person language to discuss musicians or someone's engagement or who they're talking to. And we feel like we are personally connected to these people. And this is back in the 50s. We then feel personally connected to people a lot more now. We have 24-hour access, intimate access to some public figures' lives.
Yeah, like into their houses, their kids, like their get ready with me, their what I do in the morning.
All of the routines that they have. And that's quite kind of scary. But we also sometimes forget that this is also still a curated space. And we need to think about and what we do think about in a parasocial relationship is we think about their lives in an offline perspective. It's not just our interaction with them on a screen. We also then potentially still think or care about them all of the time. And these ties move from like mild parasocial ties to quite extreme ones, where we develop very strong emotional attachments to people. And I think one of the caveats in this research space or generally is obviously self-selection bias. These are people who are heavily invested in parasocial relationships. So you start a piece of research and you're getting people who are already, they want to tell you their opinion. They want to be involved. So you kind of, even in this research space, you're talking to like the 5% who are the extreme kind of crowd. So again, I'm delighted that we have Derek, because he's like a bit of an expert in relation to this topic, or maybe you're just a fan, or maybe you're a stan generally, and that you've just gone extreme with this. So what I'm going to get you to do is introduce yourself, your background of your research, where did you start with this, and then kind of what you're doing now, so people have a background about you.
Yeah, I have to say your intro there, I think I learned more about parasocial interactions there from what you were just describing, from your experiences as well with work you've done. And you're right, we have been interested in this topic for quite a while, that, you know, that isn't necessarily, I think, well represented in how it looks now. I think you're absolutely right, from the 50s and so forth. But yeah, my interest in this area kind of came accidentally a little bit, because I had been in a research, alternative research kind of environment, kind of studying something else, and I became interested in basically the idea of K-pop fandom when I started kind of being into this area. And that's because when I kind of eventually, after doing my studies in psychology and just kind of going out into the world and coming back in and starting to look at myself as a researcher, I kind of noticed that there was this big, massive band at the moment that everyone was talking about called BTS.
Okay.
And
for anyone who doesn't know what BTS stands for.
So BTS are also known as the Bangtan Boys.
Yeah.
So these are these South Korean kind of phenomenal boy band that have literally taken the world by storm it's kind of interesting where they are now and where they were now. But anyway, they, at the time, about 4 or 5 years ago, they were absolutely the biggest band in the world at the time. And what was interesting as well, they were the biggest band in the world that were a Korean band. You know, we're not talking about the Backstreet Boys, we're not talking about anything else. We're talking about a band that came from Asia that was over here,
which is quite really unusual.
Well,
but they were at the same time as like One Direction as well, weren't they?
And I'd say on a bigger scale, on a global, you know, but yeah, that kind of like, you know, they would have a similar kind of pathway into how they became who they were in that one, from that sense. So when I was kind of looking at what was going on there as well, I kind of remembered my own research interests were kind of looking at video gaming and media, and I was kind of going, I like that idea of social identity. I like that idea of kind of, you know, who we are when we're online, and what things are we exposed, and listen to that makes us up for who we are. So what I did was I kind of put one and two together, thinking, is there actually literature in this area? I was actually very surprised from a psychological angle. There wasn't a huge amount.
I'm not so surprised, because a lot of times
there was a lot of research, but there isn't a lot from our psychological end of it. So it wasn't in psychology journals. There's probably a good reason for that, because I mean, you know, I think there was that element of psychologists, and I don't want to brand them all, and to be unfair, but you know, there is I think a tendency for some psychologists to kind of pathologize what we go about these kind of areas, and that was the one thing that I was thinking, that if we're going to be doing that, we're going to be seeing a pathological or a very skewed negative idea. As
like
to what
anything that
is.
young people are really into tends to get pathologized by older people a lot of the time,
because we freak out.
And like Beatlemania was
100%, and it was
pathologized as well.
What I think is really interesting about this is that you kind of like fell into this research area, but you literally just almost went down the garden path of, this is really kind of fascinating. And it's not within cyber psychology moving into looking at, I remember when you first, like, we've known each other for a long time, and you said, oh, I'm going to like look at K-pop. And I was like, where is this fella going? He's supposed to be studying psychology. Like what? And I was going to conferences presenting like attitudes research, and like you were going at the same time presenting this K-pop study. And I was like, what is he doing? And then I was at your talks, and when you were presenting this research, I was like, this is actually so interesting. But it's not the fact that it was just interesting, it was fun. And I think that
We don't
kind
see
of
that a lot.
but I think that kind of is what taps into this whole phenomenon. I think it's kind of like the battery cell for your research area.
It is. It's fun and it's colourful, and there's a bit of so there's all kinds of psychology in it involved as well. And I think you're absolutely right that where I was going with that one. I think one of the main ideas I think in media research for psychology was that when we were looking at, I'm sure you would have discussed some of the research from Dr. Linda Kay, and she was talking an awful lot about gamer identity and processes around those areas. So that was really big research. I think that a lot of people were interested from around 2016 upwards, and that we saw a lot of research kind of around that area. So I that was kind of my inspiration for the approach I took to some of the work I've done. So when I was looking at K-pop, I think what I immediately was drawn towards was a very social psychological area of it, because when I was kind of looking at the research around it, was very kind of, there was a lot of sociological research on it and a lot of consumer behavior research on it.
Of course,
A lot of kind of cultural study, a lot of anthropology. And there was some amazing theoretical and perspectives from those that kind of went, where could we put some psychology into this? And it's very hard to kind of find where some psychology research were going. So it was just nice to kind of explore that a bit more.
But it has a really strong theoretical background and framework.
It does, yeah.
Do either of you know what I'm going to test Nicola first because she may not know this. I think Derek will. Do you know what a stan is?
Yes and no. So I have a vague idea of what it is, and it came from the Eminem song.
It did. Okay.
Okay, because I love Eminem, right?
Okay.
And it's basically a fan that's just a bit too much, right? So Stan was the guy in it who went too far, stalked him, basically kidnapped his wife, put her in the boot of the car, all that kind of stuff. So it's too much of a fan, stalker fan kind
Would
of thing.
you add to that, Derek?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting that's where we kind of initially jumped at the stand. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of going on. So I suppose in the fandom, there are different forms of fans. There's lots of different types. And there's only emerging research about what kinds of fans there are. So Stan is at the very kind of end of the spectrum of kind of A1. That's the one that we kind of did. And this is where some of the media
You're
hasn't been
making
very...
a choking expression while you're
Am I?
doing that.
Yeah, okay. This is what I mean. I don't know how I come across in these. I've got to just relax going, what is that? So I'm learning a lot too. But basically, so you've got a broad spectrum of what all the fans are. And at the very end of that, kind of on the negative side, you've got your stan, I think. So, and in some of the kind of fandom literature as well, particularly around K-pop, this is the idea of what's called a saseng fan. And a saseng fan comes from Saseng Pen, and it was research that came from I think cultural studies, whereby it's this idea of the stalker fan, but would actively stalk the K-pop idols, that would go look for them on the street. They'd seek out taxis to follow them around Korea. They would go and they'd write messages for them in blood. All this kind of stuff. Now here's the interesting thing: is that it's by no means representative of the fandom. Even the ones that tend to score high in fandom and fanship on the studies don't come out in it. So
if we'd look at stands or so it does come from that Eminem song. So if we stick with the extreme example for a sec, it's a highly devoted person or fan, and basically some people refer to it as a stalker fan, and some people just use the origin of stan, so this obsessive fan with that subculture, and they just go far too far, and that is the extreme end of that stalker fan. So do you know?
I also think a lot of people use it at the start. You were like, "Yeah, I'm a stan for the podcast," and it's I think people use it like that as well.
But they do. But it's
now that you say it,
it's a subculture. So
that was
I'm gonna so it's saying I have huge support for that show, and people use it as a verb. A stan is a verb and a noun. So we're going back to English grammar here, but they. Identifying as a stan or stan behavior, I'm such a stan for that show, and I'm really supportive of it. Now, do either of you know who Johnson Wen is?
No,
I
guarantee you do know who Johnson Wen is.
Really? No, you're talking to me, remember? Because anytime you say that, I never know what you're talking about.
Okay. Thanks.
And was I supposed to say yes to that?
Derek
I guarantee that you both know who this is.
Okay.
So Johnson Wen is a extreme, I would say he's a stan, but he's more on that extreme side of the parasocial relationship. His acts quite recently are related to Ariana Grande. Do you know who he is now?
Did he follow her and try and hug her at something.
He
or
basically
something
he tried
assaulted her, kind of.
he did assault her.
Yeah.
Like she was at the Singapore premiere for Wicked.
Yeah.
And he went up and he almost like choked her. He also did the same thing to Lady Gaga. He did the same thing to Katy Perry, and he is obsessed with female pop stars. He is that example of extreme stan. Derek, if we move from stans into fandom, how would you define fandom?
Yeah, I mean, just with the example that you're there again, kind of like, and you were right, there is that, but you can always see that there was a bit of a running theme there with the female and
Yeah.
women things there as well. So that kind of misogyny, that kind of obsessive sense, and that's the same thing with those Stan. And even if you look at Stan in the Eminem music video, he also had his own underlying issues
Yeah.
Yeah.
that were there with the child and
His
his
own
own relationship. So they do they underpin a presentation that looks like taking it out on and
Yeah.
coming through their media figures and who they are. So
it kind of
that's
ties back into our stalking
100%.
episode, our cyber stalking episode with Cassidy as well.
Yeah, so but what that does, it tells us is that there is, the idea of an attachment to that figure, or there is an element of doing that, and that's kind of what I think you're kind of asking me about now. And you're asking me about what fandom is I would kind of see two things, and some of the social psychology research would say the same. Is that you've got these two ideas: you've got your fandom and you've got your fanship. And we don't tend to really talk about the fanship enough as we do the fandom.
Okay, I didn't realize.
And very simply, from a point of view, and there's research kind of showing. So basically, they're all about attachments, an attachment point of view. So your fanship is your own personal attachment to the interest. It's when you go home and listen to Taylor Swift or whoever you're interested in, and it's you fall in love with the music and you listen and you like it, and nobody has any interference or anything to do with what you've got. So we all have moments like that with the things we're interested in.
I was going to say not with Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I can
Sorry,
listen
any
to
Taylor fan or
Yeah.
Swifties out there, but
I can listen to a Taylor song, but I'm not like, and I would have years ago been more into Taylor Swift, but now I'm just like, it all kind of just sounds the same to me.
Yeah, and that's fine, and that's your own, that's personal taste in it. But you
Yeah.
will have your other.
I know I
you'll
can
have your other
fully
one.
accept that
Yeah.
someone else is going to go,
Yeah.
shut up, Liam.
And we
You're
all have
wrong.
our own things that we really like.
And to notice that you're saying we're all saying the same things, but we're not in a rush to say what those things are.
Oh, I'll tell you.
Right, go for it.
My current obsession is an artist from America who was born in Liberia, but his name's Monrovia and his music is gorgeous. And I just saw him in Vicar Street recently. He's fabulous. Also,
I thought you were going to talk about Stromae for a minute.
and Stromae. I freaking love Stromae. Absolutely love him. But like Monrovia is my driving music. It just completely chills me out. It's so nice. And then I have a playlist with a whole bunch of different stuff on it. So like I was probably one of the top listeners to our lovely editor and producer Owen for his music, because his music is also absolutely gorgeous.
Just
so,
don't, we won't call you a stan. For
let's
that.
not. Sorry, I'm not a stan. I promise. I just
Well,
like your music.
with that example, doesn't it kind of tie into your own identity a little bit? That
Yeah.
interest, that you're kind of someone that would have some alternate interests. You'd have some specific ones that would tie into.
yeah.
So it kind of captures you very well, actually,
Yeah.
from what you've said to me as well. But sometimes, you might have someone that might be reluctant straight away just to say, I am a fan of Coldplay. I am a fan of Taylor
can
Swift.
understand why
And,
they'd be
exactly. So there's a sensitivity
so judgy
involved.
today.
There is. There's such a sensitivity involved in sometimes saying that I'm a Manchester United fan, or so, because what
Clearly, yeah, because that is so wrong.
see,
My
yeah.
husband is one.
Yeah, Star Trek, Trekkies, and it's all there as well. So, and that's because there are some kind of negative context with the fandom, and that's what this is. So, like, I mean, we don't know. I don't think you never know someone enough about what they're going to be interested in, how they go about. So my one would be, I mean, I was, especially as a teenager, I was mad into Marilyn Manson. I was into him,
snap.
Nightwish. I was into all of the a lot of emo kind of music. I went to Funeral for a Friend a million times.
Jesus.
I did. I loved Katie. I was going to say Katie Taylor. I do, but Katie Tunstall. Went to about 4 of her gigs, and I just loved her stuff. And at the moment, I'm still kind of like I'm dipping in and out of everything now. So and then K-pop. I loved BTS. I did. I was definitely an ARMY.
See, I'm like so interested by this because I don't listen to any K-pop.
I don't think I've ever heard a K-pop song.
I have
Oh,
definitely.
you
heard
have.
it.
You
maybe.
absolutely
Yeah,
have.
but-
You
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
have. Yeah.
But like I don't listen to any. I don't actively seek it out. Like if I'm working and listening to a playlist, it's like I play classical music, so like I'd listen to that when I'm working or stuff without lyrics, and then if I'm listening to music, it tends to be kind of like pop rock, or it really depends, dance or
And
electronic.
you're right, and that's because fanship,
Or-
going back to what
yeah.
that is that it's considered to be what's called a fluctuating phenomenon.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting when your interest is in their prime while you're like alive and they're alive.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
still get your fans. I'll say I'm a massive Elvis fan.
Yeah.
Or a Beatles fan.
But you
and
can't
they're-
go see him.
You can't go see, and they're not producing anything.
What did they
Yeah.
do with ABBA? They
Yeah.
did the like VR
Yeah.
interactive
Oh, God,
immersive
yeah.
thing, and they were talking about doing that for like the Spice Girls reunion. I'm gonna tangent us too much if I go down that route.
So with that said, then so the likes of like, and I'm picking on Taylor Swift a little bit here because I know she's just such in
I'm
her
gonna do
prime,
it
and she's
too.
probably not even the height of her career and fame.
know,
So
but her-
it's that's where she
the
is. But she's just
Swifties are
phenomenal.
wild.
100% they are, and you know, while and it's a great fandom to be in, but luckily for them, their interest is alive and well and kicking. So the excitement that they're going to have when she's about to release a new single,
Yeah.
the new album's coming out, when she's declared the tour. So that's not happening for someone that's going to say that they're a Beatles fan now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why that
Well, there's a
fluctuating
Beatles
phenomenon.
movie coming. That's
Is there?
Yeah,
Is there?
I saw the
it's funny.
photographs of it. I'm gonna keep tangenting us. I'm
Yeah.
gonna.
Well, I
need
just
to be so
also
careful.
realized that you didn't say what you were a fan of, and you got away with that one.
I did.
So
I didn't catch that.
I just talked about stuff.
did he? He said what
I
mine
didn't
were.
hear. I loved the Spice Girls when I was growing up. Ace of Base when I was my earliest band when I was
I am
there.
so much
Loved it.
older than you.
I can't. To answer the question, I actually did dodge because I was trying to figure out what I like the most. Like my Spotify Wrapped was just like so like multiple schizoid personality
Yeah,
disorder.
mine was
its,
very
its
random.
results. It was really strange. It went from like classical to like this like a load of house into like Moby and then like back out again.
Moby, that's a
Moby's
throwback.
amazing.
But like,
yeah.
but it was jumping all over the place, and then I was like, "What is happening?" Like, I listened to a lot of, I don't know what the genre would be, but like in the last couple of year or so, like more kind of like female artists, like female folk, like oh my god, The Last Dinner Party. It's
you
Stromae
know,
I'd
I'm
listened to quite a
terrible at
bit.
names for anything.
And
Last-
like
is
Lola
the Last Dinner
Young,
Party a band?
yeah.
Oh, I've never heard of them. Lola Young's great.
And like they're kind of the ones that would have been in my top. And then after that, like I'm a Trekkie to a point.
same.
And then
Much more so than Star Wars.
I'm a gamer as well. So like
Oh,
I like
yeah,
Exactly.
of course.
yeah. And like
Any particular game franchise?
the game I'm playing at the moment is the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Which is amazing. I
Which
played
is the
that, yeah.
second. I'm on the second one. Which for people who aren't in that space, this is a game that came out in 1996
Six or something, yeah.
seven,
Yeah.
and then it was like 4 discs, and you had to like change disc on the old PlayStation with a toothpick so that it would keep going.
cool
And
was
like
that?
it was like, and now they've remade it, so that's like proper stan culture. Because like I would follow when it was coming out or what it was
Yeah,
going to do,
yeah.
and I'm still following now what is going to happen next.
Yeah.
So that's fandom, right? Not
I think it's
Or
more fanship. It's more fanship.
Fanship.
So yeah, and that's what I mean. And also fanship is determined by like what you don't like as much as that. So a lot of BTS fans might say, I'm not an EXO fan. Do you know what I mean? Because you might have that kind of.
What's an
Who are-
EXO fan?
So EXO is another band.
Oh,
another
okay.
K-pop band,
Okay.
and they'd be kind of like a rival. And well, you know, what I mean, it depends on who you talk to. Whether they might go, they're not even the same league as it or whatever. But
Yeah.
but in general, in terms of when you know. In terms of K-pop, they were kind of a similar kind of demographic and a very similar kind of music style as well, a little bit as well. So does that. So moving on then from your own personal interest in that, and that's
Which is the fanship
which is your
part. That's
fanship.
what you're a fan of.
Exactly, and what you like in it.
Yeah.
So fandom is your attachment to the other fans.
Okay.
And everything else that goes with
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And this is where I become a Trekkie. I wouldn't watch an episode of Star Trek at all, but I would say I'd have great fun at a Star Trek convention.
Yeah.
I'd
yeah.
have great fun
I would never
dressing
gone
up,
to any
right?
cons.
Who wouldn't
Right.
have great fun at a Star
Exactly,
Trek convention?
exactly, yeah.
That seems like the most fun thing ever.
Yeah.
A Star Wars
Well, not the
fan.
most fun
Yeah.
thing ever. Or Star Trek. Did I say Star Wars?
No, but I was saying who wouldn't have the most fun is a Star Wars fan.
People can be both.
Yeah.
They tend not to be.
Yeah, I know. It's really weird.
And a good example for me for that was that like when like I wasn't a big massive Red Hot Chili Peppers fan. I remember one year I went to, I think it was the last of the Oxygens. I think I was literally just 18. Maybe I wasn't, I don't know. But anyway, Red Hot Chili Peppers played and they
remember
played an unbelievable set. And
They
I was
were
like,
amazing,
I was like, you're familiar. So but I was looking at them going, I can't believe I don't listen or
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I even said I can't believe I don't like these.
Yeah.
And I was like, they
Yeah.
actually put on a great show. And the crowd energy
Yeah.
and watching other people really interested them kind of gets you more interested into
Yes.
it. And
Yeah.
this is where we're touching on fandom. You know, you talk about like your stance one, but you kind of see them kind of going into other areas like your collectibles,
Yeah,
your wearing the t-shirts, having the collecting everything that's there and doing that as well. And that's kind of big as well. But there's other kind of ways around as well. So we kind of have this kind of digital side of things that we're interested in here and that as well. And a lot of that fandom for the likes of K-pop and other ones as well is that they're more kind of morphed and seen online.
Yeah, well, they
And
have
in
their
digital
online
context.
communities.
Yeah.
But-
And that goes way back. Like there was a big online community for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I was never part of because I got into Buffy kind of late.
Yeah.
But
Buffy's a great fandom as well. Like it's a lovely, interesting
it?
fandom. It's wonderful, because again, it just ties into that alternate interests and has that kind of, because you can see how it mirrors
Totally.
the personal identity of the person as well. And that's why it's so important to touch on this one.
So, Derek, you actually have papers published in this space. So you have one that focused on social identity.
Yeah.
Which is hitting on these kind of factors now. So like with K-pop, is it we see it as this like obviously because of its origins, like is K-pop culturally different or is it culturally like bound or defined?
Yeah, I'm glad you started with that question because sometimes, again, when we're talking about, are we, it can be, there is a racial component to this, as in it's Korean. And just to kind of quote, I think it's Professor Rebecca Chioku Kianarine, she's in Maynooth University, and I remember her saying at a talk, if you look at K-pop music, it's Korean, but it's not that Korean.
yeah. It's
So-
like westernized Korean.
Do you know what I mean? So why
Yeah.
is that? How come that's the case? So it's interesting that when I was kind of reading around some of the earlier papers around K-pop is that you kind of do learn how it's tied to the actual historical culture of Korea. Do you know what I mean? So Korean Peninsula before the war, it was carved up by the superpowers. And one of the superpowers that was looking after South Korea was the United States. So what does that look like? It looks like then you're going to be engaging in some of the popular culture of what's going on there as well. So that's kind of might have been a potential start of where that kind of got in. And then, then when obviously they got up and run as an independent country and so on, K-pop is now, like, I think it's like the third biggest export of Korea. So when we think of Korea, we should be thinking of things like technology, information, IT, digital. The second one is cars.
Okay.
The third one is
Yeah.
their entertainment
That's mad.
and what they've achieved with that. Like,
Yeah,
imagine
it's
what
great.
we could do here if our entertainment was taken that seriously by and what they've achieved, what they've gone on that one. So it's fascinating.
I actually don't have I love a couple of stats. I don't have a stat
I've
for
none
how
on
much
me, Andy,
K-pop
yeah.
is worth.
It's a lot. It's a hell
Give
of a
me
lot.
a moment.
And that's where when the entertainment industry as well is kind of also seen as an oppositional force sometimes to the way their neighbours in the north might actually
Right.
operate as well. So there can be some kind of geopolitical conflicts by
Yeah.
doing that. And so from a North Korean perspective, some of the research also shows us that when that tries to creep in there as well, it might actually be a threat to how they might work with their models and their ways around it. So
When you're trying to sell North Korea as like the best place in the world, and then suddenly you see this stuff come out and it looks way better and way more fun.
there are cases that we do see some North Korean young people trying to listen to K-pop, and then you can never. I don't think we can always verify what goes on there because we have to rely on it. But you do hear horror stories that they end up being punished and it ends up breaching that one. So we're talking about something that has massive.
Remember, we're supposed to keep this happy and light.
We are, yeah. I'll go back to Happy Joy Joy in a minute now as well.
Has
I have-
geopolitical influence.
I'm going to interrupt you both. I have stats.
Yeah.
But I would like to get you to guess how much this is worth because
Oh
it's
God,
ridiculous.
please don't do this to me.
Okay.
It's absolutely
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I'm curious to know first of all before you go to stat. Is that saying that it's higher than the car industry and the tech, or is that just in general you've just got a stat?
I don't have a position.
Fair enough, that's
in
all right, so
terms
just
of
doing that
other
as well.
exports.
Yeah.
Sorry, I haven't gotten the
would-
stats at the level you would like, Derek. However,
I'd certainly put it in the billions. I'd certainly put it into the. I know that's probably
Okay.
You look to be more specific than that.
yeah, you're too low.
Trillions?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't even know what a trillion. I don't even know what a billion is, but a trillion, like no clue. That's too big to even.
So their revenue reached. The last stat I'm able to find is from 2023 that's verified, which is 12.6 trillion in 2023. And that's exports, sales, streaming, merchandise, concerts, connected TV shows, games, absolutely everything. We were talking about BTS. Do you want to guess how much they're worth individually?
Individually as members,
Individually as members.
I wouldn't be as up to date as it now as I would have back then, but they were in the billions.
We're in the wrong business.
We are
guys.
indeed, yeah.
We're in the wrong
Yeah,
business.
and in the wrong
we
country,
know
we need to go
that.
to Korea and do this. So
There's been many times we've said
Yeah.
that during this podcast.
Yeah.
They're worth
But-
like $75 million
Yeah.
each at the moment.
yeah.
And that's before they start their next tour. And anyway, I'm going to get to that in a sec.
Yeah.
I have academic questions and I have non-academic
Yeah.
questions. Okay. So firstly, did you watch K-pop Demon Hunters?
Do you know, I have actually. It's been a while since I have, but I have. And I think I've more listened to K-pop Demon Hunters than I have watched it.
Did you
because it
watch
comes
it?
out in the car a lot with Huntrix and so on. But it's,
Yeah.
again, I just, you know, this is where like the conversation kind of goes, where we see K-pop as ultimately we kind of automatically assume that it's like the music that we're
only.
into. But actually, when we think about some of that, actually it's film, TV.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a whole broader. So K-pop kind of actually means Korean popular culture.
Yeah.
And I think when we start seeing it a bit more into not just music and more multimedia and entertainment in general, it starts looking at
That's
like a
really
different picture. It
interesting.
is.
Yeah.
So, and like that's what I mean. We often see it as pop music.
Yeah.
There is K jazz. There's
Oh, is
K metal
there?
music. Yeah, there is. There absolutely is, because that's
Well, of course,
it's
why-
Korean.
why wouldn't there be,
100%.
like,
That's what I
yeah.
mean. So that's why the branding of it is kind of a big.
Well,
is
I
a
just
big
never
factor
thought
of
about
that.
it in terms of like I think I've seen a Korean jazz artist at a jazz festival before,
Yeah.
but I never would have thought of it as K jazz. Just
Exactly.
like it's
Yeah.
jazz,
And-
but they
and-
do brand it.
And they may not even see it themselves, but it can be branded that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And that's why when you see those kind of figures, like what is that doing for the economy of Korea? And what's it doing? And all the jobs that are involved in that. So you can kind of imagine that it is actually a possibility when you are a school child in
Yeah,
Korea,
yeah.
that you can actually aspire to do that, and it's
Yeah.
possible. And we do see that.
Yeah.
But like early like fandom or becoming a fan, like when I was a kid, it like Pokemon, for example, had exploded, and like I was growing up in Southeast Asia, and I came home, and like it wasn't here yet, and I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, where are your trading cards? And like, do you have any shiny ones? And then like I went home and came back again the following summer, and then it was like everyone was obsessed with it, and I was like,
So over that.
no, we were still
Oh, you were still
we were still
obsessed?
very much in that. I was in Southeast Asia, like everyone was
Yeah,
into
okay.
it. But like we also had things like Tamagotchis and all of that era of tech, like of early kind of obsessiveness. And like you were talking about this previously with your
The glowworms.
and like being
Yeah,
obsessed with
less
these, like,
less
comparisons.
techie than
Less
like
techie.
Tamagotchi.
Your
Back in the
Tamagotchi had
old-
to die.
Back in the old days.
Back in the old-
I thought you were going to say a Furby. I just remember them. for
Oh,
some
I
reason.
had a
That's kind of-
Furby as well.
Yeah.
I am feeling old in this conversation. I have to admit, this is the first time in a while.
But like, why do you think people are so obsessed with K-pop Demon Hunters in particular? Like, so many people.
It is really cool. Like I've
Yeah.
seen one episode of it when I was over with my brother and his partner and my niece, and she loves it. Like she just loves the visuals and she
old
loves
is
the
she?
music. She's only 2.
Okay.
But my brother loves the music. And so he's like happy to play for her. He's like, she probably shouldn't be watching this, but like she doesn't know what's going on anyway.
So well
and
produced.
the music's great.
But like
Yeah.
we had a request from a colleague to like in one of the episodes we do, and I had this episode planned, but this colleague was like, "Would you please just talk about K-pop Demon Hunters and help me understand or figure this out?" And I was like, "You know what? We actually will. That is really interesting." And I was like, "And there's a piece of homework I need to go and watch it. And I just haven't yet.
Oh,
I still
it's actually
haven't.
really fun. I see why it's so popular. Like it's
I really need to go and watch it."
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is, and you're right, it's so well produced, so Korea. But if you look at some of the themes in that as well, and this is where I think with K-pop culture does a little bit better in the way, is that there's almost this purposive push to try and get, let's represent, women and stereotype and get rid of stereotypes a little bit more, whereas they've been kind of doing that automatically. And if you look at something like K-pop Demon Hunters, it's all about, you wouldn't think that there's any stereotype
Yeah.
influence there, because it's seen as that
Yeah.
that kind of warrior and that kind of there. So there's a lot of
They
things
seem
that kind of
equal, yeah.
there is that end of kind of just promotive of proper, I think,
Yeah.
stereotype kind of
But it goes back into social identity and like youth
Yeah.
exploration. So like
as well. Yeah,
we've spoken about some of these themes in other areas of cyberpsychology, like developing a sense of self,
Yeah.
and kind of like understanding who you are and navigating that in a safe space, either through music or TV. There's no risk taking exercise in that, and it provides then in these communities, like it allows people to engage in, like this psychologist in me is like, this is a massive social experiment.
it is.
And
isn't everything that suddenly becomes popular though.
but it's huge. Like online fandom is massive. And like as a result, there are positives and negatives to this. It's a huge fandom rabbit hole that people can go down, whether it's like K-pop stands or like comfort TV shows that we watch, or
Like, I think heated rivalry is the current thing, that
Yeah.
there's a massive fandom
there's a
developing
huge
online.
fandom about that online.
It's very
we can't
weird,
talk about too much
though.
about that because that's going to bring us down.
And even
other-
prior to K-pop Demon Hunters, there was Squid Game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
Korean.
yeah.
That's in the same kind
Yeah.
of.
I never
category
watched
of
that
roundup.
either.
So-
I didn't
all-
watch
all
that
these
either.
big
Yeah.
TV shows happen,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
I just don't watch
no, I
TV.
never watched it.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right when it comes to that identity kind of formation. It's kind of seen, especially when we see with adolescent development, it's kind of seen as when we are trying to understand who we are, and we might take something like K-pop Demon Hunters and go, well, that's what I like, that's what I'm interested in, and it's almost kind of saying you're not into that, and I'm not one of you guys, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of
yeah.
where you are like the mainstream normies.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Whereas I'm
Normies.
this kind of, yeah, do you remember
You're
that
the
word, right?
normal
You're the
people.
normie, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not norm. There's something different about me, and there may very well be something different about them
Yeah.
because they could be neurodiverse. They could be, they could be exploring their own sexual and gender identity. They could come from somewhere that just not quite fitting in. So there could be ethnicity and
But
so
it
on.
could
So
be something as simple
this-
as they're just introverted.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but that again, that just shows up as some different type that's just
Yeah.
outside of
Yeah.
it, and then having that kind of alternative interest like that really just slots right in there
Yeah.
as that kind of development
Yeah.
process. So it's
But like
quite
it's-
liberating.
It's heavy investment in a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a community that these
Yeah.
people develop a sense of belonging to. So it's a
Yeah.
powerful phenomenon.
Yeah.
And we start to identify
With
as a
that
part of
community.
that
Yeah,
community.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that does other things,
Yeah.
which I know you talked about in your paper about like self-esteem, a sense of
Yeah.
meaning, this social identity aspect to your research. How important was that in relation to K-pop fans? Is it like the core
Yeah.
theory behind
I
it?
don't know, we're kind of getting a bit academic now as well.
We
but
have to touch on academics
Yeah,
at-
so
at
we're getting
times, I'm
so
sorry.
just a small bit. I think when you're starting an area that you're not so familiar with from, if there's not so many papers and work to go on in a particular area as well, I think you have to draw on your theory. I think
Oh,
we
of
say that to
course, yeah.
students, right?
Yeah.
So for me to kind of go, there was a lot of work around social identity theory in other forms of media. That's kind of what I kind of would have transferred it over to this and said, can I look at this through that lens and understand it? So we talked a bit about fandom and fanship. If you actually think about those again from a theoretical, it fits right in with a personal and a social self.
Yeah.
But we
Your
can
personal self with your fanship and your social self with your fandom.
Yeah.
They kind of correspond nicely.
Yeah.
They're not the same, and there's
Yeah.
more to them. So then we could start looking at things like, identifying with a certain way and what benefits we get out of it. So some of the tenets of social identity theory is that when we self-categorize, in other words, when we say, I am a K-pop fan, or I'm a BTS fan, or I'm a K-pop Demon Hunters Netflix fan, as opposed to not on the radio, because we hear Huntrix on the radio and they're in the
Yeah.
clubs. You may not like the music, you might just like the thing. Then that kind of eludes and promotes those kind of sense of those well-being benefits and self-esteem that come
Yeah.
from it.
But
Yeah.
these communities, they create their own language, their own
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah.
They identify as like Swifties or Directioners if we take it out of K-pop. And then in their forums and their own online communities, they create their own avatars. They create their own fan art around their community, but also of themselves in that community. And then playlists that they link, like Spotify playlists that they might link into their bio that it tells you their identity and their top 5 favorite songs. And this signals to other members of that community. So do you guys know of any other online communities besides Swifties, Directioners, and before we move into specific like BTS or K-poppy ones?
I know the old ones.
Fandoms.
The,
Give
like
us the old
the
ones then.
Buffy and was it Firefly?
Oh yeah.
And obviously Trekkies, Star Wars.
I remember the Firefly community were really annoyed because it was never renewed.
I know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those kind of communities, like
RuPaul's
Sense8 was
Drag
never
Race as
renewed. And I
well.
think there's some
Drag Race is
Yeah,
a good
Drag
and
Race
Drag
is a big
Race.
one.
Yeah,
Drag Race is big.
definitely.
Yeah.
So there are other fandom communities that do happen now. There are fandom communities around like Love Island.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
Because that's already pre-existing relationships. You don't even have to work very hard to say that these two people would be so much better together. And
And I'm sure like The Bachelor and all of those kind of ones in the States as well.
all of
100%.
those have their own communities.
90 Day Fiance. I'm sure probably has one
yeah.
too.
Like there's, what's that Australian one that's about weddings? Oh Married at First Sight. That's what I'm thinking of.
Oh, I haven't
But it
seen
has
that.
like
That does look
acronyms. It has its own like acronym culture as well.
Yeah.
And I know you're talking about the specific, but this is where like you're right, and K-pop is known for it as well. But what happens is when during the formation of a band for something like K-pop, and same with the likes of your One Direction, is that they will factor in fandom community into that, because that's what a part of consumption and keeping it going.
Yeah.
So one of the I'd say some of the the engines of getting K-pop artists like BTS, they wouldn't be anything without their fans.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So you do have to design and cater for the fans as much as for BTS.
Yeah, that's why each of the characters is so different. So
100%.
everybody can identify with one of
Exactly.
them or fancy one of them or whatever it is. Yeah.
But do you remember so this is on YouTube, and it was like, I don't know if it's the X Factor or Pop Idol or whatever iteration of that show it was. But when One Direction auditioned as solo artists, and then I think it was like Cheryl Cole who actually
Put them
all together and was
yeah.
like, they would look great. Girls are gonna love them. And she wasn't talking about them as a band.
Yeah.
She was talking about fans, and what she was really talking about was revenue.
Yeah.
But like,
And if you think about it as well, like, so I don't know if you followed it, but Simon Cowell came out with a recent Netflix documentary about his new band. But he's on the hunt for a new band. Well, he found one now, and one of the things that came out and that was bringing back One Direction, because we know what happened after One Direction. So they obviously had a massive career after X Factor, and then he said they put them together, and then there was a relationship between Cheryl and Liam Payne, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting other part of it as well. And then Liam Payne took his life. Do you know what I mean? So that kind of resurged a little bit more about interest in One Direction again.
Okay.
So, but what happened was then when Simon Cowell was making his new band, he referred to that moment. So this is actually affecting the way I'm making a band right now.
Okay.
And then he actually designed his new band. It's actually a 7-piece band, which is very unusual in Western band design.
Yeah,
because
it's usually
they're
5.
it's usually 5 or 4 maybe. But yeah, you're right, 5. And the reason it was because he wants to rival the K-pop bands. And that is literally how he's made this new band. I think they're called December 12th. Don't know. It's all very new
Seems
to me
like a
around that as
terrible
well.
name, but
It does,
what do I
yeah.
know?
And there's another
there
rock
must be
band.
a reason why
Yeah.
he's named them. That's really obscure.
Because that's when they got together. They named it themselves, and he loved it or something like that. I don't want to give any spoilers, but you'd have to. I just gave all spoilers. Actually, I've just spoiled that documentary.
And we are also completely on a tangent
That's
anyway.
okay.
So
Now, in terms of the other pros, like let's go back. So parasocial bonds. So within these communities, they provide us with comfort.
Yeah.
They provide us with companionship, and they make us feel connected to each other. Now, these parasocial relationships aren't necessarily bad. So we find inspiration from a role model, someone who's come through some sense of adversity in their career, and we potentially feel less lonely, less marginalized. And as a result of this, we gain senses of social support. And even if we have no social support offline, it still provides us with that in a continuing space offline, because it comes from an online space.
And as we know from the episode on trolling and harassment, even if you feel envious of them and you want their life, which can be a little bit painful to feel, if it's benign envy, you're actually inspired by them to go and do something to change your own life. Whereas if it's malicious envy, you're trying to drag them down. So I'd say there's a lot of that inspirational stuff within
I think there's still malicious envy. So I'm
sure there is too,
I'm
yeah.
about to move us to the risks.
I was staying light.
Yeah.
I have like a small piece on the risks, because Derek did do a paper on some of the negative aspects of this. So are there any risks in the K-pop fandom community? This is a really thrown in question because I know the answer to it, but our audience won't. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about risks? Or
I think anytime there's a group of people that share characteristics and different, like they're a very diverse fandom, so there's everybody there. I mean, I remember doing some research and I got engaged with what's called the Silver Army, and it's basically older adults that are BTS fans, and they tend to be around. And then you've got children.
Wait, where does the Silver Army come from? Where does that label come from? That's
So-
an in-group.
Because the army is the BTS
sorry,
fandom,
I
right?
didn't explain that. Yeah, the Army is the official name of the fandom for
Yeah.
BTS. Sorry, that's the case, isn't it? So you might say I am Army, and which is really interesting because Korean Army is a whole thing, right? So anyway, they are the armed. So the Silver Army are the idea of these older adults that tend to be disregarded and almost infantile when they talk about interest in things like boy bands and popular culture. So you can see how stereotypes are already playing around that area.
Yeah.
So Silver Army is
Okay.
kind of
dismissive. Yeah.
exactly around.
No
so,
one's going to see you do a silver
a hair flip. I just
silver
did a hair
army
flip. There we go. They'll be like, I think
I'm recording him. I'm going to show that.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah, I know. I met them. I met them at an actual BTS academic conference in London.
Oh, that's so
And
cool.
there was members of the Silver Army there. And I sat down. I said, I want to talk to you because I've just never heard them. So that was very
amazing.
interesting. And she said like when you're in a fandom like this as well, you can be kind of overlooked as someone that would be interested.
Yeah.
And when you go into work and imagine you talk to colleagues that are of the same age of you and same doing that, and they might look at you going, it's a bit weird that you like a little boy band.
Yeah. It's very childish.
That's what they might exactly.
It's very
And
judgmental.
so it is actually, isn't
Yeah.
it? So when the fandom has a diverse area like that as well, I think they can be subject to different forms of harassment online. So that is a
Yeah.
risk. I think that can happen around as well. And we kind of know that the BTS fandom in particular are very much so aligned with the values of the artists themselves. So BTS would say they're all about love myself, they're about social justice causes. So therefore the fandom are going to try and match that to kind of be like them. But so you'll often hear the K-pop fans did something with something that Donald Trump did or something or something else. Exactly.
Yeah, like bought all the seats for like
They bought the
shows
seats
that he
up
was
so he
putting
couldn't
on,
have
so
the
he couldn't have any audience.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
so you see K-pop fans kind of being on that. So they will try to align their behaviours with doing that. And as a result of that, they can be targeted online for differences, for, they can get kind of trolled, they can get doxed, they can get that. So those are some interpersonal risks that can come just from being
In
a
that
collective in that
Yeah.
community and expressing online and being who they are.
Yeah.
So other kind of risks as well is that, like, that sometimes we were talking about extreme fandom is that, and there's not a lot of research on that, is kind of breaking up with your idol and the feelings of when they've decided to stop in their prime and so on. That. So it actually can be anxious, depression, and we do
devastation,
see, exactly,
like,
because especially like if you only gotten into them and really connected with them, or if you really connect with the idol. So there can be as if a real life breakup has happened, and that's why I think, I know you might get into this in a bit later on, Liam, but it's I think I would challenge the idea of parasocial relationships even just being purely online. I would say they're offline and offline because they have these things, and I would challenge the to quote one-sidedness of them because I think there is reciprocity. I think there is at least an element of it there that's a bit more now than it has been. So I think we really need to look at some of those kind of.
So I've supervised two research projects that have looked at I've supervised a couple of projects that have looked at parasocial relationships, but two really stand out to me. I'm going to touch on one later on, but one of them looked at influencers, and it was done by a student of mine, Cian, and he was looking at parasocial relationships from the influencer's perspective in their communities and their awareness of the parasocial relationship. And I'm really cynical here because in his research, there was an awareness of the parasocial relationship. Some of it was implicit and some of it was explicit, looking at between micro and macro influencers. And some of them would have training in tactics to support or influence parasocial relationships. So like this awareness of this one-sided relationship, I would say, yes, in the past, maybe it was more parasocial. I think the offline relationships are potentially could be more parasocial than the online ones.
Isn't that interesting? And we automatically assume that they belong necessarily in the online digital world. Actually, they're
of
not.
Course,
Exactly.
That's just where a person's expressing
100%.
them, where we can see it. But
there is, like, these over investments lead to unrealistic expectations of who we're in a parasocial relationship with as well. So like we spoke about it earlier, like in terms of financial strain, but there's like loads of red flags, I think, in terms of risk. So like excessive time spent online, if you spend money on that particular figure or band.
Well, it can be costly.
Intense feelings of jealousy about their real life partners.
And to other fans.
And
to other fans who have more of the stuff and all that kind of stuff.
And I know I'm not trying to bring us back to K-pop, but there is also, again, this ties into the reason why there's also so many of them. So like, and I know that we're not really in the world of CDs and vinyl things like that. So,
yes,
but we are. I suppose we kind of
Vinyls
are.
are on their way back.
They are.
They have been for a
Yeah.
while.
I'm still not buying any, but there is. I don't know. I have too many subscriptions as it is. Now. It's kind of gone. But like, if you've got something like Girls' Generation. They could have 12 members, and they each bring out a version of their own album.
Oh, Jesus.
They might, as in,
no.
it's the same CD, it's the same content in it, but it'll have artwork and it'll have different things
Okay.
that's there.
God.
So if you're a super fan, you're not buying one copy,
No,
you're
you're buying
buying
12.
12, or you're buying as many. So do you see what I mean? You're
This
kind
is
of
the
like saying,
only way anybody in the music business is actually making money, other than like Spotify. And
This
stuff.
is just
Yeah.
mad.
so the consumerism is it's and this is why and this is again one of the labels I think the BTS army fandom get, is that they kind of be seen as this left wing socialist group. We're talking hyper capitalism here. Like we're not talking
It
about
is,
like
it's
it's
serious.
hyper capitalism.
So, but like, if
So-
you're a parent and you have a couple of kids who are into different K-pop,
Yeah.
that is serious.
Take out a
financial
second
strain.
mortgage, guys.
Yeah. I mean-
But the other red flags, like if you're having strong mood swings based off what the content that they're
Yeah.
posting, which does, like there's examples of that
Yeah.
online, and then believing that you and the person you're in a parasocial relationship with have a two-way bond, like, and you were just alluding to it,
Yeah.
without any evidence, and then where you start to neglect your real relationships. So you're the idol who you have a potential parasocial relationship with is live streaming, or they're going to be doing a specific performance, and you decide to prioritize that over an offline relationship, your actual friends. Calm down and just like walk away for a couple of minutes.
Go
would be
for
my
a walk.
advice.
Go for a nice
You're
walk.
like-
Yeah.
And reflect on that potential problem. If I move from the kind of fandom aspect of this and into other areas, so like parasocial love, from a parasocial relationship, but where the person says that they experience love or what they perceive to be love. And this, I have an example of this in relation to BTS.
Yeah.
So did you see so BTS are coming back? Okay, if you didn't
Were they
know
gone?
BTS, they were gone. There was a
They
big
were
thing.
never gone. They went into the army, but they
Spoken
were
like
never
true
gone.
army.
Yeah. No.
Okay, but
And they're coming
they-
back with a bang. They're coming back with a massive
But
world tour
there was
as well.
it was all a
Yeah.
bit of, there was like a court case around this,
Yeah.
and
Oh, really?
there's loads of drama in the background of this. I did my research properly for this. Didn't do my academic research, but I did my.
And you certainly did more than I did, Liam, because this
found
is
out
coming
all
out
the tea.
really well.
But,
Brilliant. Yeah.
like I wanted to know about these communities, and what I found was really interesting is like there was people who were very vocal in the BTS or in the army who were very vocal around this court case and really angry and upset about it, and other people were like really happy because essentially they were whiplashed back into doing a tour contractually.
That they didn't want to.
I don't think they wanted to do this.
Those contracts, for one thing I do know, is that the contracts for those South Korean musicians are often
If you're a part of
appalling.
the army, please do not attack us for our opinions on this. They're just opinions.
Yeah, I
The
literally
army
know
are great. They're not
nothing.
going to do that at all. But there is but if you look at what BTS as individual did, so there is conscription into the military in South Korea. They have to. Everyone does it, no matter how, and that goes for K-pop celebrities and artists as well. So if you look at what they've kind of been through in that as well, so they would have missed elements of their celebrity sometimes, and there's a lot of pressures in that as well from the actual point of view of the artist. So and there are horror stories about, there is kind of autoethnographical and autobiographical accounts of the K-pop artists and figures themselves and so that as well. And we kind of know that they can sometimes report in those kind of problem mental health and that kind of go beyond just kind of the typical, right? So you kind of know where I'm going with that one.
Because I imagine there's massive pressure on them.
There is,
Yeah.
and so that's there as well. So when BTS are in the army and they're kind of fulfilling their duties as well, that's all playing as part of it. And they would kind of contest and conhuman and go, look at our lives now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they were having a conversation. And they do also want to maintain the love they have for the fans. They are. So I could see why there might be some kind of, a rush for basically their management and so on to get them out there and get them working around
But
as well.
it's more than just their music. It's their identities, and then
And personality is everything. Yeah, absolutely.
You've put it in really well in terms of like even the example of the CDs. And I was going to touch on this is like each individual band member needs to have its own individual identity. And this is nothing new. Like we had Scary Spice and Sporty Spice.
Exactly.
And like these
great example,
identities
yeah,
have
yeah.
been around for a really long time. And like they had merchandise that was tailored to their own identities. And these subcultures move towards one potential band member. So there's like sub armies
Yeah.
for different members of these
Exactly,
fans,
there is,
which
yeah.
as a psychologist, I find fascinating.
And I'm a J-Hope.
Really
I'd be a J-Hope. You might be touching on what's called a bias.
Yeah.
And it's not like, we talk about bias and research here. Like, have you got a bias for doing it when you research, right? It's kind of like you would explicitly say, no, I have a BTS bias, and I have a J-Hope bias.
Yeah.
As in, like, that's the one that, he looked at me in the crowd,
Yeah,
he knows I
yeah.
exist. But I would also identify more so with it. And he'd be characterized by someone who is happy, smiley, jumps around, and kind of raps a little bit sometimes, jokey, fun, and stylish, and I don't know if they cover me now. You said know me. Derek's like, this is not Derek. But,
like one of the least
ones.
excitable, calm, like not excited about stuff people I've ever met.
Is there a K-pop cat that Nicola can be?
I don't know. There probably is.
There probably is a K-pop cat.
There'll be a link now. I don't know what you're talking
Someone
about.
will find it. But I think this is really interesting because the Prime Minister of Mexico recently said, and I was mentioning this to Derek before you arrived, Nick, the Prime Minister of Mexico has requested specifically for extra tour dates. There are tour dates, but extra tour dates in Mexico City because she's such a huge fan and she wants to go every time.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I love that.
But it's not just K-pop. Like, it's important to, like, there are other trends. So, like, Taylor Swift, we touched on, like, she, like, if you've never heard of Taylor Swift, like, her communities are huge. Like, she
Massive.
my favorite example of this, to show you the reach, she got engaged. And then in typical fandom behavior, she said how pleased she was. She created this very hyper curated post, and I'm trying my best not to sound really cynical because it was super curated and edited. And she asked for privacy around her engagement, but then put this post up. So there's this very significant issue. And she said, your favorite gym teacher and your favorite English teacher are getting married. And that fed into her fandom community.
She's just like us.
But it was liked by, just like us, liked by 37 million people, shared by 2.6 million people directly from that one Instagram post, and 10 million, because she has her comments turned off, 10 million people responded to her through DM by sending her image back to her in a response.
Christ.
So, like, she has her comments disabled because her community is so strong. She doesn't want it on her platform.
She kind of feels the same. Again, look at her values. She kind of represents independence. She kind of has, she kind of makes her own decisions. She kind of has that kind of, again, social justice component to herself as well. She's a great philanthropist. You know what I mean? And her fans would kind of see themselves as kind of in those areas as well.
With her tour as well. Like, she gave, and like, I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but I find all of this area really interesting. She gave bonuses to all her staff. Did you see that video?
Yeah, I saw
her
something
tour?
like that, yeah.
And she gave massive bonuses to her team around her anyway. And this was like, because people criticized her for the amount of money her tickets cost. And people were going multiple times, and this kind of like,
and she's like a billionaire, isn't she?
She's a billionaire.
And think about what the broader community does. So, like, when she comes to play, let's say in Dublin, down by the Tree Arena, like, if she was playing that, all the businesses locally on each concert night are going to be absolutely out the door.
Jammers,
the hotel rooms are going to be packed and so on. You know what I mean? So this is what I mean for the example that you gave for the Prime Minister of Mexico, is that when they come, they were literally
It's
talking
a boost
about
to the economy.
a massive boost to that as well. So I can see why it's kind of, please stay.
But even the other
Absolutely.
day, like, they were talking about this as well. Like, Riverdance is coming back, and there is a big cultural community around Riverdance in the States, and there was a court case around where this money would go. So you can go look this up yourself.
I saw that. Yeah.
And like that, it wasn't about this really small court case. It was about the revenue generation outside of it. When you're, and I have my cynical hat on again.
Do you ever take it off?
I'm not cynical all the time. But now, if we go back to Taylor Swift, when she got engaged, some of her community were really happy. There were other sub-communities that were not happy about this. So from a psychological perspective, there was this shift when people had this significant intimacy or closeness to her lyrics, her journey. You kind of touched on that.
So again, that kind of I think she was single for a long time, actually, wasn't she? So didn't that
A lot of
touch
her
on
music
that
is
break
about
a little
that,
bit?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Isn't there like a subsection of her fandom that is convinced she's actually a lesbian underneath it all?
spoilers.
Oh, sorry.
Spoilers. I'm about to go there.
Sorry.
But wait, so there's this sense of awareness. They think they're super involved in her personal life because the community is so detailed. And there's these subcultures that you were about to ruin.
I like some of Taylor Swift's music. I wouldn't be a Swiftie by any means, but wasn't she the most documented artist in the world online or something like that? When there was like more pictures and social media content of her from when she started to now than anyone else. I think there is something like this.
I like it again. It's my cynical hat. Like she flies 2 private jets around the place. One so people don't spot her. That's what the president of the United States does. Like
that's what I did to get here. So there's a fake car just on the motorway. Just like, that's Derek.
That's Derek's car. Yeah.
And here we are, like cleaning out her plastic yogurt carton to try and save the world, and she's flying 2 private jets around.
No, but there's all these issues that are in the background that these communities forget, and some of the time it's because these communities do this. They track both the tail numbers for her planes, and like it's super intrusive for that person.
It is. Yeah.
That's stunning, right?
That is standing to
More
a
than
whole
that,
other level.
it's where, and this is where I think come bring the psychology back into this, is that standing isn't considered to be one of, it's not often talked about in the stalker type of research. If you know, I mean, I'm not, I can't say I've got expertise in that area, but there is, you know, we know that there's different forms, but we often forget about the fan type of stalker from their point of view. And I think it would be healthy to kind of bring that into this a little bit more. So you know, you might have someone on there that might talk a bit about online stalking later on, another episode.
Cassidy spoke about stalking where you wanted to be in a relationship with that person.
And they are your ideal type. Fate has meant you to be together, and so you read everything as though they're communicating
and
to you.
sending signals that you should be together.
Yeah, and they're very persistent stalkers.
And now another shift away from this is shipping. Do you know what shipping is?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you do not know what shipping is, it's a fandom term for fans who want or believe that 2 real or fictional characters could be or already are should be in a romantic relationship with each other. And I supervised an undergraduate student who did work on this, and I loved this project. It was by Maeve O'Looney, and she looked at shipping of 2 particular shipping relationships, and I would like you to figure out if you can figure out who these 2 ships are. So they looked at Kaylor.
That's got to be Taylor Swift and Katy.
Is it Kanye West?
No, it's going to be a girl. Katy Perry or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think of anything that starts with K.
It's Carly Klaus. She's a
don't know who that
supermodel.
is. Okay.
And this one is a little bit more obvious. Larry Stylinson.
But they're two directioners. Yeah.
So
I have no idea who they are.
Larry Tomlinson and
Louis Tomlinson and Harry
Larry
Styles.
Tomlinson. Sorry, get that out. Larry Tomlinson. No.
Louis Tomlinson.
Louis Tomlinson and
and Harry Styles and Taylor Swift and Carly Klaus. And with like Larry Stylinson or Kaylor, it looked like they were blending, and where this knowledge came from is they were blending like cues from Taylor's music, and this is a sub community within her army or
her Swifties.
And photos, videos, and then she drew all of this from YouTube comments. And
this student,
yeah. Well, the fandoms draw all of this from videos and music and images, and they create like compilation videos. And the compilation videos are what my student focused on. She looked at a really tiny sample of 1,190 comments after she had filtered them.
Wow. Okay. And that was only the tiniest percentage of everything that's out there.
She did exceptional work. Really, really great. And what I thought was really important here is that with like the community, they had like in-group and out-group kind of language that they would use. They had language like you spoke about earlier, like they called them the antis. So people who didn't
anti-fans,
agree,
the anti-fans,
who didn't agree with the fact that these were.
There's been all kinds of different fans, and you know. And here's the thing about shipping as well, is that we, you know, what we're doing it for and what we're getting out of it, I think is what interests myself and probably and yourselves as well. Not just the methods of how they do it. So one that comes to mind for me is Jack and Rose from the Titanic. That's a ship, literally a ship. Like it's a ship and a ship. You know, they're shippers. So that's one. So people brought them because they belonged and because that was it. But actually, it's a fictional, fictional cast on that one. But if you're kind of, I kind of refer to like your student did great work on that one to kind of look at that level from especially going through those kind of comments and getting the in-group out-group idea. But I would look at Dr. Thomas Bodnett, I think, in Australia, who what he does, his work on shipping goes into Southeast Asia, and he has some of his work has highlighted that I don't know if you ever heard of a community there called the Fujoshi. You might know them as the Yowie.
Okay.
So it's basically, it's groups of women mostly that get together and ship Asian artists, mostly probably K-pop, and in a way for them to explore themes like homosexuality and themes that would be more considered taboo in where they are.
But this is what they
So
do
this
with
is
the
an
shipping
interesting
in,
one.
the,
Exactly.
in this study.
Yeah.
What I found really interesting is she with her work, it's shipping couples and treating like this couple is absolutely real. And like in her work, it was like crime scene hunting for like blue hearts, representing that they were actually in a relationship together, and it was this secret love, and you just couldn't understand the fact that it was there. And there was like conspiracy theories that were happening in these comments, that managers were covering up stuff, and all of this happening in the background. And
Is that like a queer community who want her to be part of the community,
no,
or
some
is
of them
like,
aren't in the queer community.
they just think this is going on and
Yeah.
it's fascinating. Like,
And like in Maeve's work, I said like she analyzed like just under 1,200 comments. Like this hasn't come
amazing,
from nowhere.
yeah.
And she looked at these popular compilation videos, and we spent a really long time, almost like a systematic review of these compilation videos of why they should or should not be included, length of time of the videos, the amount of comments they had underneath them. We had inclusion criteria for the amount of words that needed to be in these comments. They had to be substantial. So this is like, we spent a long time with this. And she did thematic on it, and she looked at it or constructed 4 themes: social comparison between these communities and within the community, and how involved they were. So they would actually compare themselves. They would make upward and downward comparisons between each other in this community, even if they were in group.
as like the bigger fan or the more involved or has the more information and stuff.
And you can see how it comes back to identity very quickly.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Very,
It's
very
like, how
quickly
many of
going
those
into it.
CDs do you own?
Yeah.
It comes back to
Yeah.
the same concept.
Yeah.
So
And
that
then-
so there's a bit of social capital in there as well,
Yeah.
and everything going with that one as well. And that's again not amazingly. It's a great research, but I'd be very surprised if anything else didn't come from that one, because based on from what we know from the research, it's very in line with what the international research I think is emerging to say. What I would say as well about the where anti-fans come into that is because so sometimes shipping can sometimes be seen as a negative behavior, especially when, for example, there could be like something that went on with the group, like they fight for each other. So people fight, and even in those groups too. So, or they went through a breakup or something like that. Like, so putting them together to upset fans.
The justification for these themes is really interesting. So like that was social comparison is the first one. Then it was social identification. She pulled out conspiratorial thinking as one of the themes, and then actually coping mechanisms. Okay, I'm going to bring these through. So in terms of like the social comparison and identification, so we can kind of group these together. So like they would use their in-group, so like describing themselves as Larrys, for the Larry or the style, and then Gaylors was the other one. They would use symbology, so like blue and green hearts for Larry was what was used quite a lot. And then they would use like we language, the emotional attachment, everything that we've spoken about. And then they would villainize the outgroup. So they would call them antis. They would refer to, if you disputed the shipping, they would say you're a part of the management. And then they would call them hets as well, as in heteronorms. And they would say that they were then touching on like homophobia, and all of this fit into like social identity theory really, really well. The conspiratorial thinking was shippers compiled proof. Okay.
Yeah.
Hidden messages, fake beards, public relationships, and then they would dismiss doubters. So why are the antis even here? And then they would generate like endless theories, like it's just a management cover up. And Maeve did this really well. She discussed how there's still elements of like echo chambers happening here, and conspiratorial ideology even within the shipping community. It might be a positive kind of space, but there was still conspiratorial thinking.
It's really interesting because like some of the drivers behind conspiratorial thinking are to understand when things are complex. So you make up a conspiracy that gives you an answer, but also to feel like you know more than other people. So it gives you social status. And like, I know more than them, and they're so stupid because they don't know this and they can't see it. I can see it. So it's really fascinating.
And there is a link between that kind of thinking and popular culture. Like, I mean, you might have heard of the Avril Lavigne.
Oh yeah,
idea.
well,
Yeah.
she's a clone.
She's a clone. Right?
Yeah.
So
My
and
favourite.
I think what conspiracies do is I think this is where Maeve might might have a better answer than me on this one. But the idea is that we kind of feel like that matches what we would like to believe where they are in time. That is what we would kind of get, and that kind of fits in with that must be what's happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, so especially if we haven't heard from them in a long time, so it kind of gives that perceived comforts to think that that's
but that
where
was
it's going.
a huge kind of misinformation piece around Avril Lavigne being
but it's still fueled. It's still
going.
It's still fueled.
But so if you're not aware of that, they basically said Avril Lavigne had died in the middle of a tour and they replaced her with like a robotic clone, like something like almost out of like Austin Powers in terms of like it wouldn't do.
And
very
I'm reminded
much.
of, comedian Alan Carr. So he did like one of his Chatty Man episodes, and says, because I went on to Google it, I didn't realize I died last week. And someone literally rang me. He said and said hello, and I loved the way I said hi. That wasn't are you dead? Like that wasn't confirmation enough to know that I died because of the media had said I died and everything else. It kind of creeps up with those. I think it does feature in those kind of it just gives those creature comforts of we think that we know them. We think we know what's going on.
We know better.
100%. And that conspiracy, I can see why that might be a reason.
You touched on this earlier as well, Nick, when you were talking about like people using shipping to come out or to explore sexual identity as part of fandom, and she discussed this in terms of like the coping mechanisms theme. So she said positive escapism and projection. So
really
like
interesting.
In the comments some of the people were making was like, they give me the courage to come out, but it was also venting about things like personal struggles, seeking social support within that community, and it was like an emotional outlet through their fandom.
Because I suppose it's a safe space. If everybody wants to believe that she is queer, then that's a place where people are okay with that. So you can.
But like as a conclusion for her work, basically Maeve argued that hyperpersonal communication, so the barriers that are dropped because we communicate through tech, were supercharging social identity. With obviously these were edited posts, they were using emojis, selective feedback loops, and basically it blurred fiction and reality.
She did amazing research.
It was really good.
If she's listening to this, I'd love her to send some
That's
stuff on.
undergrad research, guys.
There we
really,
go.
really good.
But it goes to show that this stuff, I mean, and I think she really highlights this, whether she knew it or not, because she shows that this is actually a complete melting pot of different psychologies that brings in everything. Do you know what I mean? And that's why the lens of social, it can also be, as much as it was a starting point, I think it can be a bit of a box in as well. It can be something that can just kind of go out. So I think it really fleshes in.
It was
those
really,
kind of ideas.
really
So
cool.
there's a lot. I think there's a lot of scope for a bit more of that research.
There is loads of scope there.
There's a lot of scope for it.
I want to move to parasocial grief, or back again to parasocial grief, because you did discuss it earlier in relation to BTS. Have you ever seen someone post online about how they cried more about the death of a character or a band breaking up than they did about their own personal breakup?
Absolutely.
Yeah, or like, Whitney Houston, or when someone that was just a big part of us growing up and we realised, oh my God, and we see that a lot on social media, just going, I can't believe this. So it's common enough, isn't it?
Parasocial grief, I think it's kind of understandable. And like whether that's a celebrity that's being cancelled because they've disappointed fans or they've done something, or a public figure actually dies in real life. And we are really upset by experiencing this, and we see it on social media.
The moment you brought that up, I thought of Chef in South Park. Do you know what I mean? Because I was kind of like, he was a character that just left, didn't he? And then
he just disappeared.
He just disappeared, and then then there was like one episode about 4 seasons later or something like that they kind of like just put a load of his stuff together and made him a character for a day, and then it was a real mess up episode.
He was also super racist.
Yeah,
so that's
100%.
why he was removed.
Yeah.
For them to remove him as a character is
but again, and I know you're right on that, but again, when we have
you've
those
no
kind
idea
of like,
who we're talking about.
Oh no, I know who Chef is, but
Okay.
I'm like, oh God, there's 2 of you in the room with me now.
2 South Park fans. But I think so if I give you an example, I want you to think of can you remember where you were when this happened?
When Jerry left the Spice Girls?
No, you're going to be young for this. Do you know where you were when Princess Diana died?
Yep.
Yes.
Where were you?
Living in London.
Okay. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know where you were when Michael Jackson died?
No.
Do you know where you were when Whitney Houston died?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I remember all 3 of those, and I know where I was, and like I remember like my mum is from the UK, and my mum loved Princess Diana, and I remember my mum's response to that for quite a while.
I think my mum cried at it as well.
Oh, yeah.
I do remember the house and the reaction, because she did have such a. It was that quote, wasn't it, that she was the princess of people's hearts as opposed to a real princess type of thing.
But they sold like videos of her funeral. because it was such a big thing.
Like there were so many things on sale and like the entire of London shut down.
Yeah.
It was wild.
But they did. They based her funeral on the Queen Mother's funeral. They used that whole plan. But like with parasocial grief, I think what's from my perspective, I can completely validate someone who experiences parasocial grief.
Yeah,
I can
likewise.
understand why someone would be upset.
And Princess
by
Diana was a
someone doing
great one because if you remember, they when they expressed grief, they were expressing not necessarily grief that this person had died. That is sad, but they were also expressing anger at the establishment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
And
there
blaming
was
them for
it had a full blown relative and useful function for them.
Yeah,
So I would completely think that it serves a massive function.
I think there was a
Yeah.
lot going on with that, and then the
100%.
good work that she did in the world that was gone, and like there was a lot going on there. Yeah,
There's different communities that she tied into. Now, there is also something that I think is a new, it's becoming more well known, which is parasocial resurrection. So BTS, for example, are a good example of
Oh,
this.
I don't know. You're upsetting armies now. They're going to say they've never died to begin with, so it's good.
So they
yeah.
went away. They stopped. Bands like Take That have done this. Like Westlife, Jesus are still doing this. They go back and forth like there's no tomorrow. All of these bands that are disappearing and making
Reappearing,
comebacks.
okay, yeah.
And like there's been recently all the stuff with the Beckhams and the media. Posh Spice is like #1 in the UK or is in the top 10 again, and they're talking about a Spice Girls reunion, and this is
wasn't Grok used to like make videos of Victoria Beckham dancing on her son's lap or something at the wedding? Like that's the only thing I heard about because I'm interested in all the Grok stuff, so that came up on my timeline.
But it's people are talking about these resurrections have like comebacks. Okay, parasocial resurrection is just a comeback, and I think this is really interesting now, where you've seen like the president of Mexico and all of these other people going, I can't believe they're coming back and they're doing this. And there's this level of excitement and communities are being reignited.
Yeah.
Like you
And
spoke about
they
this
are like
earlier.
middle-aged and stuff. A lot of them, like when
And the money runs out.
Westlife or whatever
Yeah.
came back.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
The money does start running out because they're like, it isn't, sometimes even being in that fame, like it isn't an endless money pot
No,
either.
no.
So they have to make their
Yeah.
living. They have
Yeah.
to come back and do it. So there's
But
that
what
side
I
of
meant
things as
was like
well.
the fans are middle-aged a lot of the time.
Oh,
like
yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
people I know went to, and they may not even have been huge fans. A lot of them were of like Take That and stuff like that. And they went to the concerts, and it was like, it wasn't kids anymore, and it wasn't teenagers. It was all these like 40-year-old women screaming their heads off at it.
But it's a scooter a while back, though, so there's no kids at it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
so it was,
jeez.
yeah. It is resurrection.
deadly,
He's
though.
still touring.
There
Amazing,
is
yeah.
a parasocial resurrection that you will be interested in, which is Buffy. Sarah Michelle Gellar is doing it.
I know. I hope it's good.
It will be.
Because the original was so perfect.
I'll tell you,
Like
speaking-
it wasn't perfect, but it was great.
I'd love to ask you about Buffy in that sense. I'd love to say to you, how would you feel about that being remade?
It is being
Well, it
remade.
is being remade.
Right, so how do you feel about that?
Concerned.
Right, why?
Because things were made differently back then.
Yeah.
I think everybody in it now will look so perfect and their makeup will be so perfect all the time, and it won't have the darkness maybe
It
that
won't live
it
up to her
did.
nostalgia.
And gaming is the same, whereby when they
Yeah.
made that, you were talking about
They
Final Fantasy
clean it
earlier
up,
on,
like-
and you worry, you just don't mess with the,
Yeah.
you don't mess
when
with
you have
and
an attachment to
so
it.
exactly. So we're going back to
Yeah.
fanship, and then you're also kind of saying that it's almost tying into your nostalgia and what you remember well.
Yes.
You're almost
Yeah.
messying that up a little bit,
Yeah.
and I think it makes that uncomfort. So you can
Yeah.
see the personal in this going.
Yeah.
You're almost messing with my childhood here.
I know. Now, if
You know what I
they
mean?
do a
Like,
really good
yeah.
job of it, I'm so excited for it.
Yeah.
But I'm just like concerned. It's like when somebody makes a film of your favorite book and you're like, oh
Yeah.
God, what are they going to do to it?
To close out, so let's look at the future direction. Where do you see parasocial relationship research or fandom research going?
I see it being taken up more as an actual serious and interested field of study. And if there's one thing I would like to see, I'd like to see kind of clinicians taking it seriously in practice. There's this idea of geek therapy out there, and it's when I don't think it has huge traction, but I think it's getting bigger, and there's all sorts of politics behind it as well. But it's the idea that you bring the fandom interest into the therapeutic space and you use it to help children and adults to be able to understand the experiences and emotional processing that they go through.
Yeah, that's
so I'd
really
love to see
interesting.
some more research done on those kind of
Yeah.
clinical applications of fandom. So
Yeah.
we take Sonic the Hedgehog very seriously. We take Pokemon seriously. We take Buffy in a way that, well, why has this person come to me, and what can I use Buffy as a clinician and a
Yeah,
therapist
yeah.
to bring this person to talk about, reflect. So why
Yeah.
did you do that thing? Did Buffy do it?
But like we use
And
games
it's a nice way to
in
talk about
therapy
doing
all
that.
the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, and you use games to talk about difficult topics with
Yeah.
young kids.
But do we use it as a therapeutic tool?
Yeah. No.
I think we should do a bit
I
more
was
on that
listening
one.
to a really interesting podcast, In Bed with Right, which I love, and they look at gender, sexuality, and right-wing politics. But they had a guest on, Abby Cluchin, from the Ordinary Unhappiness podcast, and they were discussing romantasy, which is the combination of romance books and fantasy books. And they are pretty much keeping the publishing industry alive. They are so popular. They were talking about why mostly women, but not all women, but why women in particular really, really like them. There are strong female characters, but they're usually still like at the whim of particularly powerful males in it and stuff. So it breaks some gender stereotypes, but not others. But they were talking about it as healing, because the women often come through a lot of trauma, and it actually, like, using story as a healing tool for trauma can be really, really powerful. And like reading these books can help with that. And I find that really fascinating as a perspective. And I think for something like Buffy, the trials she goes through, all of that kind of stuff, like, people, obviously we're not going through anything similar, but like, we all have difficulties in our lives, and looking at the way they overcome it and use humor and use, you know,
she had to
reinterpreting it,
But to be fair, she had to fight like supernatural vampires and all kinds of other things, and try to maintain a boyfriend or relationships, and do schoolwork, and she had to do her leaving cert while all of this was happening. So like, you can fully understand the trials that she's gone through.
And like, anyone who's watched it and has also online dated can understand the parallels. I mean, the demons, the vampires, everything, you know.
And as you were saying that, I was reminded of the power of fan fiction.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Buffy would have a lot of fans that rewrite the stories for themselves, and they include themselves in it, and they rechange the plots and plot holes, and it can be very therapeutic.
Yeah.
So if I was being, I would love to see more research done in those kind of areas.
That would be so
or
and where that's
fandom
going.
where TV shows have been cancelled even.
Yeah.
And like, but I think parasocial relationships or fandom and these communities, shipping or stands generally, I think this is going to become even more immersive. So like, we look at algorithms, live streaming capabilities, movements in tech, AI companions, all of this. Like, can you create an AI bot that's going to be Buffy based off all the TV
But that was
shows?
what I was going to ask about. Like, can you create each character from
like BTS
BTS
in a bot? I'd say they've probably done that now, kind of monetize
that you could interact with, and then it learns from your conversations, and it becomes whoever you want it to be in a way.
That's where we're going. That's why I think the likes of your K-pop and Buffy would be the same eventually. Is that as soon as it corresponds well with the technological capabilities at the time, it's going to remain.
Yeah.
That's where
I see that as being much more problematic than the kind of way that people engage with it now.
But the future for helping these people in these one-sided relationships is gaining a sense of social support from a role model, that connection, and then being mindful that these relationships are ultimately asymmetrical.
100%, yeah.
You have been listening to In Bits, the podcast that deconstructs our digital lives. I'm Dr. Liam Challoner.
I am Dr. Nicola Fox-Hamilton.
And we have been delighted to have been joined by
Derek Laffan.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
Soon to be Doctor.
Dr. Derek.
We've a while to go. But
you can follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram and TikTok at InBits Podcast. We do want to hear from you about any topics like this, which one we've covered today, your experiences, your thoughts, and how you think the series is going. Unfortunately, this is our series finale.
Sort of.
For now, we're going to do a few pieces. We hope you enjoyed this season. We've covered a lot of very different topics, positive and unfortunately quite often negative.
That's me.
And we'll be uploading a little mini series for you that looks at kind of expert opinions from various different colleagues we have in cyberpsychology to deep dive into some of these short project areas or research areas to kind of keep you going between season 1 and season 2. Thank you very much to our producer, Owen Hurley, for both all of the work that he has done in production and editing, and for our lovely theme to music.
And he's amazing. You should definitely check out his music. He's on Spotify.
She's a stan.
I am. Sorry, I'm.
Thank you very much, and we will see you soon.
See you soon.